What if a Hollywood icon worth over $380 million was quietly cleaning the toilets beside you? Not for PR. Not for show. But because he wanted to feel what you feel, the weight, the silence, the invisible wounds of being overlooked. One of Hollywood's most respected icons did exactly that. And what he discovered in a hidden staff room would change not just a company, but the very meaning of leadership. In an era of quiet quitting and the Great Resignation, where employees are refusing to tolerate toxic workplaces, this story couldn't be more relevant. Welcome to Motivation for Success, where we unveil stories that shake the soul and spark your inner fire. If you believe empathy is the most powerful tool a leader can have, hit subscribe and join a movement that redefines success from the inside out. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments so our community can see how far this message of leadership and dignity is spreading. Behind the luxury and glamour of a five-star hotel, lies a hidden world most guests never see. But one man was about to change that forever. Dawn had barely broken when an unfamiliar custodian quietly punched his time card at the illustrious Summit Skyview Hotel. The magnificent 60-story glass structure dominated the downtown skyline, its shimmering facade reflecting the first golden rays of morning sunlight. From the outside, it represented the pinnacle of luxury and exclusivity, a playground for the wealthy and famous where rooms started at $1,200 per night and the presidential suite commanded $25,000. Clad in standard-issue Navy maintenance attire with his cap pulled downward to shadow his face, he maneuvered his supply cart through the corridors undetected. The wheels squeaked slightly as he navigated the plush carpets of the service hallways, passageways designed specifically to keep staff invisible to the discerning guests who expected perfection without witnessing the human effort behind it. His reflection caught briefly in the polished brass of a service elevator, a face that would normally command attention on magazine covers and movie posters now deliberately anonymous. There was something liberating about this invisibility, he thought, even as he recognized the profound difference. He had chosen this temporary anonymity, while others lived it as their permanent reality. What would you do if you found out your janitor was actually the owner in disguise? Let us know in the comments. Few would have guessed the astonishing reality. This unassuming custodian was none other than Keanu Reeves. He'd recently acquired the entire property but deliberately chose discretion over announcement. The purchase had been handled through layers of corporations and legal entities, ensuring absolute confidentiality. Only a handful of top executives knew the identity of the new owner, and none of them understood why he'd insisted on this unusual arrangement. He wasn't interested in celebratory toasts or media attention. The gossip columns and business magazines would have had a field day with the story, Hollywood icon ventures into luxury hospitality, but such headlines held no appeal for him. Throughout his decades-long career, he developed an almost allergic reaction to the superficiality of fame and its trappings. What most people don't know about Keanu Reeves is that long before he became famous, he worked service jobs to make ends meet. While everyone knows he donated a significant portion of his Matrix earnings to the special effects crew, few realize his personal connection to the service industry shaped his business philosophy years later. He wanted to witness genuine human behavior, when people believed no authority figure was monitoring them. His time in the entertainment industry had taught him that real character reveals itself in the absence of scrutiny. The way executives treated assistants when no directors were present. The way co-stars behaved toward crew members when cameras weren't rolling. These moments of unguarded humanity had always told him more than any rehearsed interview or carefully worded press release ever could. For 72 hours, he worked in silence, polishing marble surfaces until they gleamed like mirrors, emptying waste receptacles filled with discarded luxury, half-eaten room service meals that cost more than many people's daily wages, scrubbing toilets in penthouse suites where the bathroom fixtures alone cost more than most cars. His body, accustomed to the physical demands of action movie roles, nonetheless ached in new ways from these repetitive tasks. By the end of his first day, his lower back throbbed from the constant bending. His hands, despite the protective gloves, had developed tender spots from gripping cleaning tools for hours on end. There was something humbling about this pain, a physical reminder of the labor that typically remained invisible to him and others of his social standing. He meticulously documented every interaction. The way guests walked past him as if he were merely a fixture of the hotel itself. The subtle differences in how various staff members were treated, the visible hierarchy that placed front desk personnel and concierges above housekeeping and maintenance in the social ecosystem of the hotel. The careful performance of deference that every employee mastered, regardless of how they were spoken to. His purpose wasn't to criticize, but to truly understand. This wasn't about judgment or finding fault. It was about seeing clearly what had been in front of him all along but rendered invisible by privilege and the carefully constructed barriers between service providers and those they served. What began as a simple observation mission was about to evolve into something far more profound. The truth hiding beneath the surface would shake the very foundation of this prestigious establishment. But what he heard next would break your heart and reshape an entire business forever. As evening descended, Keanu entered the staff lounge, a cramped basement chamber where the hotel's housekeeping team snatched brief moments of respite. The stark contrast between this space and the opulent guest areas above couldn't have been more pronounced. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the worn furniture and aging linoleum floor. A small refrigerator hummed in the corner, plastered with employee notices and outdated memos about protocol changes. The air held the mingled scents of various cleaning products that clung to uniforms, blended with microwave popcorn and a strong coffee that helped staff make it through double shifts. A television mounted in the corner played a game show with the volume turned low, the contestants' excitement about winning vacation packages creating an ironic backdrop for people who spent their days maintaining other people's getaways. He positioned himself in an inconspicuous corner, pretending to sanitize equipment, when a nearby conversation captured his attention. A small group of housekeepers had gathered around a chipped formica table, their voices low but charged with emotion that couldn't be contained. A guest referred to me as the bathroom girl again today. I maintained my professional demeanor, but inwardly, it was devastating. The speaker was a middle-aged woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her name tag read, Elena, and her eyes held the tired dignity of someone who had endured such indignities for years without losing her sense of self-worth. "They regard us as invisible," another colleague remarked, a younger man whose badge identified him as Miguel. He rubbed his wrist as he spoke, clearly nursing an injury but unable to take time off. "Executives instruct us to endure it, they're high-profile clients," they claim. "Remember last month when that tech billionaire let his kids trash the presidential suite? We spent hours cleaning food from the walls and ceilings, and management sent them a complimentary bottle of champagne for the inconvenience of having to switch rooms while we fixed it." There were nods around the table, each person clearly recalling similar experiences, personal indignities swallowed in the name of customer service. A heavy silence fell, loaded with unspoken frustrations and shared understanding. But what he heard next left him shaken. Then came a trembling, emotion-laden voice from a young woman seated slightly apart from the others. Her name tag read, Sophia, and her hands shook slightly as she folded her uniform apron. "I'm submitting my resignation next week. I can no longer maintain a facade while being treated as non-existent." Her voice cracked, and suddenly tears began streaming down her face. She tried to wipe them away quickly, embarrassed by this display of emotion in front of colleagues, but they kept coming. "Yesterday, a guest threw her coffee at my feet because it wasn't hot enough. When I asked the floor manager for support, he offered the guest a free spa treatment and told me to be more careful next time. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking silently. I went to college for hospitality management. I wanted a career in this industry. But I can't do it anymore, not like this, not where we're treated as though we don't deserve basic human respect. The others sat in painful silence. Miguel reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Elena pulled a tissue from her pocket and offered it wordlessly. This wasn't the first time they'd witnessed a colleague break down, and it wouldn't be the last. The emotional toll was as real as their physical exhaustion. Keanu remained motionless. A profound heaviness settled in his chest. He felt the sting of old memories, auditions where he was dismissed before a word was spoken, casting directors who wouldn't meet his eyes, the countless times he was judged for his worn clothing rather than his talent. They don't see them either, he thought, his throat tightening. Just like they didn't see me. He'd experienced similar devaluation, as a struggling performer, commuting via public transportation, wearing threadbare clothing. His mind flashed to the time he overheard a producer call him, just another pretty face, when he'd poured his soul into that audition. The shame of standing in line at a food bank after spending his last dollars on acting classes. The apartment with no heat during winter months when roles were scarce. He intimately understood the pain of being diminished, of having your humanity reduced to your function. Success hadn't erased these memories. If anything, it had sharpened them, creating a stark contrast between his past and present that often left him feeling like an observer of his own life. The conversation continued around him, stories of small humiliations accumulating like drops of water that eventually carved canyons through stone. A bellhop described carrying 15 pieces of luggage for a family who then complained about his service and left no tip. A room service attendant recounted being screamed at for a kitchen mistake he had no control over. Each narrative revealed not just isolated incidents but a systemic pattern, a culture that had normalized treating certain people as less deserving of dignity than others. If you're still watching, ask yourself this: how would your workplace change if the people in power saw what you see every day? What struck him most wasn't their anger, though they had every right to it, but their resilience. Despite everything, they still found moments of joy, still supported each other, still took pride in work well done even when it went unacknowledged. They shared photos of children's graduations, discussed weekend plans, swapped recipes and movie recommendations. Their humanity remained intact even when others failed to recognize it. But now, he possessed the authority to implement meaningful change. Not just token gestures or symbolic modifications, but fundamental transformation of the systems that enabled these inequities. The realization settled over him with the weight of both responsibility and possibility. His success had given him many things over the years, but perhaps this was its true purpose, not the accumulation of status or possessions, but the capacity to create environments where everyone's dignity remained intact. As the staff began gathering their belongings to return to their shifts, Keanu slipped out quietly, his mind already formulating a plan. He spent that night in his modest hotel room, not the owner's suite he could have claimed, making notes, researching industry practices, and crafting a vision for what this hotel could become. He fell asleep with the notepad still in his hand, filled with ideas that would soon reshape hundreds of lives. What Keanu did next stunned the entire hotel staff, and might just change how you view leadership forever. Keep watching. The following morning, management announced a mandatory all-staff assembly. The memo came down from the executive office with unusual urgency, creating a ripple of anxiety throughout the hotel. Such meetings typically preceded layoffs or unwelcome policy changes, and the timing, during peak morning hours rather than the usual transition period between shifts, only heightened concerns. Every employee was directed to gather in the main conference facility for an urgent briefing. The grand ballroom, normally reserved for celebrity weddings and corporate galas, had been hastily arranged with rows of chairs. Staff members filed in hesitantly, their whispered speculations creating a nervous hum throughout the space. Front desk personnel sat stiffly in their tailored uniforms, while housekeeping and maintenance staff clustered together, some still holding the tools they'd been using moments before the announcement. Anxious whispers circulated throughout the assembled crowd. Is it a buyout? Are they closing floors? Will they cut our healthcare again? The tension in the room was palpable as management representatives stood awkwardly at the front, their own confusion evident. They had been instructed to gather everyone but given no information about the purpose. And then, the door creaked open. All eyes turned to the janitor they'd barely acknowledged all week, only now, he looked different. He stood taller. His eyes met theirs, steady, kind, yet resolute. The room fell silent as he walked to the center of the space, his steps deliberate, his presence commanding attention in a way no maintenance worker ever had before. Several security personnel moved instinctively forward, assuming an unauthorized person had entered, only to be waved back by the hotel's general manager, whose expression reflected both confusion and dawning recognition. "Good morning," Keanu began, slowly removing his disguise, allowing the moment of recognition to ripple through the crowd. "Many of you recognized me as the new custodian this past week. What remained undisclosed is that I am also the property's new proprietor." A profound stillness enveloped the room. I arrived incognito to experience the authentic operational culture. And the conversation I overheard in that basement lounge last evening deeply affected me. No individual should approach their workplace dreading disrespect. No person should experience invisibility. Starting immediately, that reality ceases to exist. He unveiled the implementation of an absolute intolerance regulation against verbal mistreatment and discrimination, regardless of a patron's financial status or societal position. If a guest disrespects your humanity, we stand with you. If someone attempts public defamation, we rise to your defense. Because your dignity is non-negotiable. The announcement continued with specific policy changes, mandatory break periods that would be actually enforced, not just listed in employee handbooks. Healthcare expansion that included mental health support. Wage increases that acknowledged the skilled labor performed by every department. A staff rotation system that would prevent the physical strain of repetitive tasks from falling disproportionately on certain individuals. Perhaps most significantly, he announced an employee council with representatives from every department that would meet monthly with ownership to address ongoing concerns before they became systemic problems. Staff members wouldn't just be heard, they would be integral to decision-making processes that affected their daily lives. As he spoke, the atmosphere in the room transformed. Initial shock gave way to cautious optimism, then to genuine hope. When he opened the floor for questions, there was a moment of hesitation before hands began to raise, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence as each query was met with thoughtful, direct responses rather than corporate deflection. What I'm about to share might make you rethink your own workplace and leadership. By the meeting's end, something had fundamentally shifted. It wasn't just the policies or promises, substantial though they were. It was the restoration of something more essential, the acknowledgement that every person in that room, regardless of title or task, possessed inherent dignity worthy of recognition and respect. What happened in that moment would change everything. The transformation was visible in countless small but significant ways. Staff members began greeting each other with genuine smiles in the hallways. For the first time in years, they wore their uniforms with pride, standing taller, making eye contact with guests instead of averting their gaze. Morning briefings that once felt like military inspections transformed into collaborative planning sessions where everyone's input was valued. The break room, once a place of hushed complaints and exhausted silence, now buzzed with conversation and occasional laughter. Someone brought in a homemade cake to celebrate a coworker's birthday. A bulletin board that previously displayed only corporate notices now featured photos of staff members' families, community events, and personal achievements. Elena, who had been addressed as bathroom girl, now conducted training sessions for new hires on maintaining dignity while providing exceptional service. Miguel, whose injured wrist had healed, started a weekly wellness circle where staff could learn proper body mechanics to prevent workplace injuries. And Sophia, who had nearly resigned, now headed the employee council, her natural leadership abilities finally recognized and nurtured. "I actually wake up looking forward to coming here," one maintenance worker confided to Keanu during one of his visits. "My kids have noticed the difference. They say I don't look tired all the time anymore." Staff members moved through their duties with renewed purpose and pride. The forced smiles of customer service gave way to genuine engagement. Even minor conflicts were addressed directly and respectfully rather than festering beneath a veneer of professional politeness. 7 days later, an elegantly framed declaration appeared in the hotel's grand entrance, the Equitable Hospitality Covenant, an ethical mandate protecting staff from mistreatment and upholding human dignity. The document detailed specific rights and protections for employees as well as clear expectations for guest conduct. It wasn't hidden in a back office or employee handbook, it was proudly displayed where every visitor would see it upon arrival, establishing the cultural expectations of the establishment from the moment they stepped through its doors. The document was installed by the very employee who had contemplated resignation. Sophia, who had been ready to abandon her career dreams just days earlier, stood tall as she adjusted the frame to ensure it hung perfectly level. Her eyes shone not with tears of frustration but with pride in being part of something transformative. "We're not just hanging a plaque," she had said during the small ceremony marking its installation. "We're declaring that how we treat each other matters as much as any amenity we offer." Now, authentic joy illuminated her expression, not from obligation, but from genuine recognition. The difference was evident to anyone who had seen her before, the careful mask of servitude replaced by the natural warmth of someone who felt valued. The changes rippled throughout the establishment with remarkable speed. Workplace satisfaction skyrocketed, measured not just in corporate surveys but in the tangible energy that permeated every interaction. Even clientele observed the remarkable shift. Many expressed appreciation for the authentic atmosphere that had replaced the stilted formality typical of luxury establishments. Some were initially resistant, those accustomed to treating service workers as extensions of the amenities rather than as individuals. One particularly disgruntled guest confronted Keanu directly in the lobby. "I'm not paying $2,000 a night to be told how to speak to the staff," he complained loudly, clearly expecting the owner to side with a high-paying customer. Keanu's response was calm but unwavering. "Then perhaps this isn't the right hotel for you. We have wonderful competitors down the street who might better align with your expectations." The guest left in a huff, but what surprised everyone was how many other guests who witnessed the exchange actually applauded. As one later commented, "It was refreshing to see someone with power stand up for what's right, not what's profitable." But most adapted quickly, often commenting that their experience was enhanced by interacting with staff who clearly took pride in their roles. The numbers spoke for themselves. Staff turnover dropped by 78% in just 3 months. Despite increasing wages and benefits, overall profits rose by 32% as guest satisfaction scores hit record highs. Employees who felt valued delivered service that guests were willing to pay premium prices for. "I've stayed in 5-star hotels around the world," one regular guest remarked during checkout, "but this is the first time I've felt like the people serving me actually want to be here." His substantial tip was redistributed to the entire staff rather than kept by the individual who received it, another new policy that reinforced the collaborative culture taking root. Perhaps most significantly, industry publications began to take notice. What had begun as a single hotel's internal transformation was sparking conversations throughout the hospitality sector. Other establishments found themselves facing questions about their own practices. Several competing luxury chains scrambled to implement similar policies, though many missed the essential element that made Summit Skyview's approach effective. It wasn't a marketing strategy but a genuine commitment to human dignity. And Keanu? He never sought recognition as a figurehead. When major publications requested interviews about the revolutionary approach to hotel management, he consistently redirected them to speak with the employee council instead. His name appeared nowhere on the official documentation, though everyone knew the transformation had begun with his unconventional approach to ownership. He simply needed to listen and respond with action. In subsequent months, he made periodic appearances, sometimes helping maintenance staff with particularly challenging tasks, occasionally joining housekeeping teams during peak turnover periods. Each visit reinforced that his initial experience hadn't been a temporary stunt but a fundamental aspect of his leadership philosophy. His approach spread to his other business ventures as well. Each new acquisition began with a similar period of immersion. The actor whose net worth could buy the entire building and still have millions left over, working alongside everyday staff to understand the true operational culture before implementing changes. The pattern was consistent: listen first, then act decisively to align systems with human dignity. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn might transform how you think about true leadership forever. Authentic leadership sometimes requires donning unfamiliar attire and experiencing reality through another's perspective. The willingness to step outside comfort zones, especially those created by wealth and status, reveals truths that remain hidden during boardroom presentations and quarterly reports. The Summit Skyview transformation demonstrated that empathy isn't merely a personal virtue but a powerful business strategy when implemented with genuine commitment. It demands willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The initial discoveries at the hotel had been painful, not just the explicit disrespect shown to staff but the systemic patterns that normalized their mistreatment. Acknowledging these realities required facing one's own complicity in upholding them, whether through action or inaction. The most challenging aspect of Keanu's approach wasn't the policy changes but the willingness to see clearly what had always been present but conveniently overlooked. And subsequently, implementing meaningful solutions. Vision without action remains merely an idea. The transformation succeeded because concrete changes followed the period of observation and reflection. Policies were reformed, systems redesigned, expectations clearly communicated and consistently enforced. Resources were allocated to support the new priorities, demonstrating that the commitment extended beyond inspirational rhetoric to tangible investment. 1 year after the transformation began, the hotel hosted a celebration, not of financial success, though profitability had indeed increased alongside staff retention, but of the community that had formed within its walls. Employees who had once barely acknowledged each other across departmental divides now shared stories, supported one another, and collaborated to enhance both their workplace experience and guest satisfaction. In this gathering, held in the same ballroom where Keanu had revealed his identity, staff members from every department shared stories of how their professional and personal lives had changed. Many spoke of renewed passion for their work, of feeling seen for the first time in their careers. Others described being able to be fully present with their families after work hours, no longer drained by the emotional labor of enduring disrespect while maintaining a professional facade. Before, I was just surviving, Miguel shared, his previously injured wrist now healed thanks to the expanded healthcare benefits and more humane scheduling. Now, I'm actually living. And then something remarkable happened. The hotel's front doors opened, and a familiar face walked in. It was the woman who had thrown coffee at Sophia's feet a month earlier. Everyone tensed, but the woman wasn't there to cause trouble. She approached Sophia directly. "I saw a video about what happened here," she said quietly. "About how you almost quit because of people like me. I came to apologize." She hesitated, then continued, "I was going through a divorce and taking it out on everyone around me. That's no excuse, but I've been where you are. I worked in food service for years and was treated terribly. Somehow I forgot that when I became the customer." That moment of connection between two women who had once been adversary and victim became symbolic of the larger transformation taking place, not just within the hotel but within everyone who heard the story. Change was possible, if only we remembered our common humanity. Stay until the end to hear the surprising career advice Keanu shared with the housekeeping team that changed their perspective forever. Keanu didn't hold a press conference. He didn't ask for applause. He simply listened, and took action. Because real leaders don't lead from the top floor, they lead from the ground floor. As the celebration wrapped up, Keanu gathered the housekeeping team that had first inspired his actions. He shared with them the advice that had guided his own career through decades of Hollywood's ups and downs. "The entertainment industry called me a failure more times than I can count," he told them. "But here's what I learned: success isn't about winning everyone's approval. It's about knowing what you stand for and standing firm. When you do work you believe in, with people you respect, for a purpose larger than yourself, that's not just success, that's fulfillment. And no one can take that from you." He paused, looking at each of them. "Your work matters. How you treat others matters. And most importantly, how you allow yourself to be treated matters. Never forget that." It was the kind of advice they'd never expected to hear from someone of his stature, yet it resonated precisely because it came from someone who had lived both extremes of fortune and recognition. In a world that often rewards loudness and ego, this story reminds us, true influence starts with quiet courage. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away, leave a comment if you believe every person, regardless of their title, deserves dignity. What would you do if you were in Keanu's position? More importantly, what are you doing in your position right now to create positive change in your workplace? Have you ever experienced or witnessed a moment like this in your job? Share it below. Your story could inspire someone else. Tag someone who leads with heart or someone who should. And remember, the world doesn't change through noise, it changes when people like you decide to care. Subscribe Motivation for Success now for more powerful stories that prove success isn't about status, it's about what you stand for.